So, have you ever stopped and thought, do we really need a government for society to work? I know, it's a huge question, right? But it's exactly the idea at the heart of a philosophy called voluntarism. Today, we're going to dig into the essays from I Must Speak Out to explore this very concept, a world built completely on voluntary choices, not commands.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to get a handle on the basic premise of voluntarism. Then, we'll dive into why its supporters think politics is basically a dead end. After that, we'll look at what they see as the real path to change. And finally, we'll check out some real-world examples that they say prove you can have order without rulers.
Okay, first things first. What's the fundamental idea here? Well, according to these essays, it all comes down to one simple but massive choice. Are we going to use persuasion or are we going to use force? So here it is, plain and simple. Voluntarism is the idea that all human interactions should be voluntary. We're talking everything from what you buy at the store to how we organize our communities. The argument is that you can judge how civilized a society is not by its power, but by how much it relies on convincing people instead of forcing them to do things.
This slide really lays out the two sides of the coin. On the left, you've got persuasion, the carrot. Think about commerce, where both people benefit, or just freely choosing who you hang out with. It's all built on mutual agreement. But on the right, you've got force, the stick. This is war, slavery, and, according to the source, all forms of government compulsion. The key takeaway here is that voluntarists don't really see a gray area. For them, every single action ultimately falls into one of these two camps.
So that brings up a really big question, right? If force is the problem, why not just use politics and voting to shrink the state's power? Well, the authors of these essays are, let's just say, not convinced. The argument here is that politics is basically a cleverly disguised trap. It gives you the feeling of being in control, but what it really does is get you to buy into the system and accept the results no matter what. But the point that really hits home is the third one. Politics makes us argue about how we should be ruled, which completely distracts us from asking if we should be ruled at all. And according to the source, if you just look at the history, no matter which party is in power, the government just keeps getting bigger. And wow, this quote just perfectly sums up that whole contradiction. Trying to use the system to fight the system is presented as completely absurd. It's like trying to put out a fire with a can of gasoline. The argument is that the means, using political force, will never ever lead to the end you want, which is a society without force. So if politics is out, then what's left? What's the alternative? Well, this is where things get really interesting. The essays argue for a totally different kind of revolution, one that's a lot closer to home. This quote, which they borrow from Gandhi, is really the secret sauce of the voluntarist strategy. It's such a powerful idea. Your actions have to mirror your goals. You can't use violence to create peace. You can't use coercion to create a voluntary society. The path you walk literally determines your destination. So to build a world based on voluntary action, you have to start by acting voluntarily yourself. Okay, so what does that actually look like? They call it the one improved unit method, and it's pretty radical. Instead of trying to overthrow the system, you just opt out of the parts that use force. You shift your focus completely inward. It's all about improving your own character, practicing self-control, and dealing with others honestly and peacefully. The idea is that if enough people start living this way, society will change from the ground up, not the top down. It creates a ripple effect. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This all sounds nice, maybe a little idealistic, but can you really have complex, large-scale order without a government? The essays say absolutely, and it's happened more than you think. Okay, check this out. This is a really cool example they bring up. Back before 1883, every town had its own local time. You can imagine what a nightmare that was for the railroads trying to create schedules. So what happened? The private railroad companies just got together, worked out the system of time zones that we still use today, and announced they were switching to it. And everyone else just went along with it because it made sense. No law was ever passed. It was a huge, complex problem solved completely voluntarily. And it's not just a one-time thing. The authors see this pattern everywhere. Think about the miners during the gold rush, who created their own systems for property rights on the fly. Or the English language I'm speaking right now. No government committee designed it, it just evolved. All of these examples, from private industry standards to how Amish communities operate, are used to make one core point. Order doesn't have to be imposed from the top down. It can, and often does, bubble up from the bottom. So at the end of the day, this explainer leaves us with a really fundamental question. The source material is asking us to seriously consider whether freedom is something you fight for in an election or if it's something you build quietly inside yourself through the choices you make every single day. It's definitely a thought that sticks with you.